I remember it vividly, my sixth birthday party. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion, a day filled with laughter, cake, and colorful balloons. But for me, it was anything but. The loud noises were unbearable. Each pop of a balloon felt like a bomb going off in my head. The bright flashing lights were blinding, causing my eyes to water and my head to throb. As the other children ran around playing games, I found myself standing on the sidelines, unable to join in. I was overwhelmed, not just by the noise and lights but by the social interactions. I couldn't comprehend the unwritten rules of the games they were playing, the inside jokes they were laughing at, the subtle nuances of their conversations. I felt like an alien in a world I didn't understand. And then there was the cake, a towering confection covered in thick, sweet frosting. Just the thought of it was enough to make my stomach churn, yet everyone expected me to take a big bite and smile for the camera, so I did. I forced myself to eat, to laugh, to pretend everything was fine, but inside I was screaming. As the party continued, I found myself retreating further and further into my shell. I wanted to escape, to run away, but I couldn't. I was trapped in a world that was too loud, too bright, too confusing. And the worst part was, no one understood. They saw a shy, quiet child who didn't like parties. They didn't see the sensory overload, the social confusion, the internal struggle. Looking back, I realized that was the beginning of a long, unseen struggle. A struggle that would go on for years, undiagnosed and misunderstood. A struggle with autism and ADHD. That was just the tip of the iceberg of a long, unseen struggle. Growing up, I was often labeled as the difficult child. Imagine being a little kid in a world that doesn't quite make sense. School, a place meant for learning and growth, was a battlefield for me. The ringing bells, the buzzing chatter, the constant need to sit still, pay attention, and follow the rules. It was all too loud, too bright, too fast. In the classroom, I was the child who struggled to keep up, the one who couldn't sit still, the one who was always daydreaming. Teachers would scold me, tell me to focus, to try harder, but no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't. My mind was like a buzzing beehive, thoughts darting here and there, never able to concentrate on one thing for too long. My peers were no less challenging. Socializing was like navigating a minefield. I didn't understand the unspoken rules, the subtle cues, the ebb and flow of conversation. I was the odd one out, the one who didn't fit in, the one who was always left behind and bullied constantly, at school and at home. I was ruthlessly beaten and neglected. I was abused in so many different ways by my family, who considered me to be a devil, and no punishment was too much. And then there were the feelings of overwhelm, the sensory overload that turned the world into a cacophony of sounds, sights, and sensations. The world was simply too much, and I was constantly on edge, like a rabbit ready to bolt at the slightest sound. I was labeled as the difficult child, the one who couldn't follow instructions, the one who couldn't keep up, the one who was always causing trouble. But that label, that box they put me in, it didn't define me. It didn't capture the whirlwind of thoughts, the storm of emotions, the struggle to make sense of a world that felt alien and overwhelming. I was misunderstood, yes. But more than that, I was a child grappling with something I didn't understand, something no one around me understood. I was navigating a world that didn't fit me, a world that didn't understand me. But no one knew what was really going on. Navigating through my teenage years felt like walking through an unending maze. Teenage years, they say, are a whirlwind of emotions, a time of self-discovery, a period of growth. But for me, it was more like an unending maze, with no hints, no direction, and no idea of the way out. It was a labyrinth of heightened social expectations, academic pressures, and an inner turmoil that I couldn't quite put into words. The social expectations were like invisible hurdles. There were these unwritten rules of interaction, these silent cues that everyone else seemed to understand instinctively, but I was constantly tripping over. I would find myself in a room full of peers, feeling like an alien who had somehow ended up on the wrong planet. It wasn't that I didn't want to fit in, it was just that I couldn't figure out how. Then came the academic pressures. Schoolwork that was supposed to be challenging, but manageable, felt like trying to climb a mountain without any gear. I would stare at the same page for hours, unable to absorb the information. The words were there, the concepts were there, but they just wouldn't stick. It was like trying to catch water with a sieve. And amidst all this, there was the inner turmoil. The constant question of why was everything so much harder for me? Why was I struggling when others seemed to sail through these years effortlessly? The confusion, the frustration, the feeling of being different but not understanding why. I felt like I was in an unending maze, with walls closing in and no sign of an exit. I was lost, alone, and desperately trying to find my way. but every turn seemed to lead to another dead end. Every step forward seemed to take me further into the maze. I was lost, and no one seemed to have the map. It wasn't until my early 40s that the fog started to lift. Imagine spending most of your life spiraling through a labyrinth of confusion, misunderstanding, and frustration. In this ceaseless maze, there were no signs, no directions, just a relentless sense of being lost. But then, the turning point arrived. It was like a spark in the dark, a moment of realization that there could be a medical reason for all these struggles. This wasn't about being lazy, unorganized, or eccentric. This was about something else, something deeper. The idea that the challenges could be due to conditions like autism and ADHD started to form. The decision to seek help wasn't easy. There was a fear of being labeled, a fear of being seen differently. But the desire to understand, to unravel the mystery of the self, was stronger. And so, the journey towards seeking help began. There were countless doctor appointments, numerous forms to fill, and an unending series of tests. The process was overwhelming, to say the least. It was like trying to find a path in a thick forest with no compass. But there was a glimmer of hope, the hope of finally getting answers. The medical professionals were kind and understanding. They listened, they observed, they evaluated, they asked questions, lots of questions. Some were easy to answer, others, not so much. But every question, every test was a step closer to the truth. The waiting period for the results was agonizing. Each day was filled with anticipation and anxiety. The mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, constantly swinging between hope and fear. But amidst the storm, there was a calm that came from knowing that the answers were near. Then, the day arrived. The day when the results were finally ready. The moment was filled with a strange mix of emotions. There was fear, there was anxiety, but there was also relief. Relief that the journey through the fog was coming to an end. Finally, an answer emerged from the fog. And so, at the age of 44, I was diagnosed with autism and ADHD. Imagine a whirlpool of emotions, a mix of relief and confusion. Relief because finally there were labels that made sense of the lifelong struggles. The invisible battles that seemed so peculiar to me were actually shared experiences of those with autism and ADHD. It was as though I had been handed a manual to an intricate machine I'd been trying to operate blindly. Confusion, on the other hand, stemmed from the lateness of the diagnosis. The questions began to flood in. How did it go unnoticed for so long? Why did no one see it? And the most daunting one, what now? The process of understanding this new reality was like learning a foreign language. Medical jargon, therapy options, coping strategies. It was an overwhelming amount of information to digest. Yet, it was necessary. It was part of the journey to understanding myself better. Navigating life with this new information was like trying to walk in shoes that didn't quite fit. It was uncomfortable and challenging, yet it was also empowering. It was a chance to redefine my life, my struggles, my strengths, all through the lens of autism and ADHD. I had to learn to forgive myself for past mistakes, understanding that they were not failures but merely the result of an undiagnosed condition. I had to learn to celebrate my unique perspective and the strengths that come with it, rather than see it as a flaw. The diagnosis was not a life sentence. It was not a label to be ashamed of. It was a tool that helped me navigate through life with a newfound understanding and acceptance of myself. It was a beacon that illuminated the path to self-discovery and self-love. It was like a key unlocking a door to self-understanding. Acceptance didn't come immediately. It was a journey. A journey that began with a diagnosis, a label, but evolved into something more. It was a journey of understanding, of self-discovery, of learning to see myself in a new light. It was a road that was often rocky, filled with self-doubt and questions. Was I really different, or was I just broken? Along this journey there were challenges. It's not easy to accept something that makes you feel different, that sets you apart from the crowd. The world is often unkind to those who don't fit the mold, and I felt that unkindness deeply. There were moments of frustration, moments of despair. There were times when I wished I could be like everyone else, to blend in, to not stand out. But as I navigated this path, there were also victories, small victories like learning to accept my unique way of thinking, my unique way of seeing the world. Bigger victories like embracing my differences and using them to my advantage, victories that made the challenges worth it. Along the way, I discovered parts of myself I never knew existed. I uncovered strengths I didn't know I had. I found a resilience within myself that was born from the struggle, from the journey. This process of self-discovery was not easy, but it was necessary. It was necessary for me to accept myself, to love myself. I learned that acceptance is not a destination, but a journey that is ongoing, that doesn't end with a diagnosis but begins with one. A journey that is unique to each individual, that is shaped by their experiences, their struggles, their victories. Through this journey I've come to realize something important. I'm not broken, I'm not less, I'm just different. And different is not bad, it's just different. My autism, my ADHD, they're not flaws, they're parts of me. Parts that make me who I am. I realized I was not broken, just different. So why am I sharing this? Because it's important and it could be someone's lifeline. Picture this. A world where early diagnosis of autism and ADHD is the norm, not the exception. A world where understanding and acceptance aren't just buzzwords, but are ingrained in our societal fabric. We're not there yet, but that's the world we're striving for, the world we're advocating for. Autism and ADHD are not just neurological conditions, they are an integral part of an individual's identity. They shape the way one perceives the world, the way one interacts with it. A late diagnosis, like in my case, often means years of feeling different, years of not fitting into the so-called normal mold, years of self-doubt and confusion. But it doesn't have to be this way. An early diagnosis can make all the difference. It can provide a framework for understanding why certain things are more challenging, why certain situations are more overwhelming. It can guide parents, teachers, and individuals themselves towards strategies that work, towards a path of less resistance. It's not about labeling or pigeonholing someone into a category, but about understanding their unique perspective, their unique abilities. Awareness is the first step towards this understanding. It's about recognizing that a child who can't sit still might not be merely misbehaving. It's about realizing that a person who struggles with social interaction might not be simply shy. It's about acknowledging the immense diversity in human cognition and embracing it. But awareness alone isn't enough. Acceptance is the next crucial step. Acceptance is about acknowledging these differences not as deficits, but as differences. It's about celebrating the unique strengths that come with these neurological variations. It's about creating environments that are inclusive, that are accommodating, that allow everyone to thrive. So what's the message here? It's simple. Let's strive for early diagnosis. Let's strive for understanding. Let's strive for acceptance. Because everyone deserves to feel understood, to feel accepted, to feel valued for who they are. The struggles are real, but with understanding and acceptance, we can turn them into strengths. My journey has been challenging, but it's also been enlightening. In this labyrinth of life, the struggles I've faced due to a late diagnosis of autism and ADHD were profound. They were unseen battles that cast long shadows over my days, shaping me into the individual I am today. The misunderstanding I faced as a child, the relentless maze of confusion I navigated through, and the turning point that brought me to an understanding of my unique mind, it was all a part of my journey. The diagnosis was a revelation, but accepting it was a journey unto itself. It was a path that led me to an understanding of not just myself, but also the importance of acceptance and empathy in our society. And with this understanding, I have a message of hope. A message that echoes the sentiment that we all have our battles, seen or unseen, and they make us who we are. This is my story, but it could be anyone's. Let's be aware, let's be understanding, and let's make a difference.